This video is about changing variable names in a data set using the variable names in another data set. The problem arises from the proc import. So suppose that we have a txt file, which is called a schedule. Inside there are 3 columns of data. So note that there is no column heads, so there is no variable names there. So we're going to use this part to import the txt file into a data set. We're going to have a nickname for this file, and then we're going to use the proc import to import it. And because there is no variable name, so we're going to start from the first row, and we are not going to get we are not going to get the variable names. So the result is that because there is no names, then the procedure is going to automatically assign the variable 1, variable 2, and variable 3 as the column names for this data set. But these are not the names that we want to have, right? So actually the column names and the type, whatever, is defined in a separate data set file. For example, the first column should be called drug code, the second schedule, the third is a French version of schedule. So we need to replace these names, these automatically created names, with the desired names, which is specified here. So the rest of the program, the rest of the tutorial, is about to replace this automatic names with the specified names. So in short, it is like we're going to replace the variable names with the names mapped here. All right. So it is going to involve the following points. The first is that we're going to introduce a method called call executive to run the data steps or procedures. All right. The second is that we're going to modify the column names without reading or writing the file, the data. And third is that we're going to talk about the different types of concatenation, like using this operator or using the function cat and cats. And finally, putting them together is there is a succinct way to change the var names in a data set using the vars mapped in another data set. All right, so this is an outline, and it's quite abstract to you, perhaps. So we're going to go through that so that and you will understand what I mean here. Well, the first is that from this file, we need to create a mapping data set. So the mapping data set is that, okay, so this drug code is going to map with variable 1, right? So like this schedule is going to map with variable 2. So there is a simple trick to do it, which is we're going to read this file, this schedule code row file, and we're going to add a column, and I'm going to call that auto names. And it's very simple. I'm going to have a fixed string plus the number of the observations. So as long as the names, the variable names are following exactly the order we have in that imported file, then we're going to be able to automatically create the names. And now we have a data set file with the automatic names, auto names, and also with the expected names. Well, the next is that I'm going to recap a traditional way to rename a variable in a data set, which is to read a data set and save it as another data set. And when I read and save the data set, I'm going to rename one of the column. So this time I'm going to say that, well, I changed on my mind. I think AutoName is not a good name for that column. I'm going to change that to AutoVar. So this is the traditional way. I'm pretty sure that you guys are familiar with that, right? So now we've saved the variable, the data set AutoNames to another data set called map of vars. And variable AutoName was renamed as AutoVar. Well, actually, for this data steps, we don't have to, for this data step, we don't have to run it like this. We can also run it within a data step. And this is the way to run it within a data step. And we're going to use a method called a call execute. And the rest of it is that we just put the statement lines into this method and wrapped that with the quotes. So actually it would be the same as these data sets. Now let's just run that. And this time I'm gonna change a little bit. I'm gonna rename the names as AutoVar names instead of AutoVar. Yeah, so it's gonna do the same job as what I did here, right? So so this is the to show that actually for this data step, we can run that within a data step using the call execute method. So why we're gonna do it like this? Because this is quite twisted, right? So we're doing this so that we can read from a data set and do something for another data set. All right, so remember that going back, and what we're going to do is that we're going to change the var names in one data set using the mapped data in another data set. So this method, this call execute method, basically it enables that we read the data from one data set and do something to another data set. All right, so we're going to put it aside. So this is about the call execute method. So now we're going to talk about another thing is that actually we don't have to use the data set to save it as save the data set another one and rename the variables. So we can use this proc data sets and we can modify a data set by rename a variable name. So like in this case, I'm gonna modify the data set called the map of vars, and inside I'm gonna rename the variable type to var type. Well, the only problem of this type of method to rename the variable is that the data set is not going to pop up. So we'll have to use the proc print to view the data set. Yeah, we've seen that actually the type has been changed to var type. So you might ask, why are we going to use this method instead of read and write the data set? The reason is that because it saves a lot of time and resources. So imagine that you have a super large data set of like multiple gigabytes, and you just want to rename one of the variable. It's a simple job, but using the traditional ways, then you have to read from that very big file and save that as a very big file. It's going to take a lot of time and resources. So this way of rename the variable name will be simpler, easier. All right, so now let's come back to the call execute method. So previously we've said that this call execute method actually can run data steps within a data step. So the same idea is that the procs can also be ran by this call execute method, and it can also be ran within a data step. So we're gonna run this proc data set again. This time we're gonna rename another variable. We're gonna rename the variable called the name to the name of a var name. All right. So here, I'm gonna try a different way. So instead of putting all the statements of this proc data sets together, I'm going to split that into separate lines ran by a separate call execute method. And it also works. Yeah, see that now the name, the column name was renamed as var name. So why this is important? So this basically means that we don't have to have a complete block of lines of for a procedure. We can do that in separate ones, and that will make sense if we are that will make sense for the following steps that we will see. In short, it makes us more flexible so that we can inject this state lines by separate operations. All right, so now we've learned enough of the skills, and we're going to put them together. So we're going to view the data sets again. So we have two data sets. One is the imported data set, in which is called a schedule, in which the variable names are automatically created by the proc import. And the second is that we have a map data set, in which we have the auto var names, which is corresponding to this, and we have the expected var names, which is listed here. So you can imagine that. So we're gonna try to run the proc like this. We're gonna have a data set, and we're gonna modify the data set called the schedule. So the modification will be we're gonna rename the var1 as this, var2 as this, and var3 as this. Okay, so let's just go back, and we can see that actually for rename that, we can break these statements into two parts. The first is a fixed string, which is somehow like this part, and also with the rename, I would say. So this part is fixed. The next is that we're gonna pull out the value from this map data set. So somehow, if we can have a mechanism to create a string like var1 equals to drag code, then var2 equals to schedule, and so on and so forth, then we can have the rest part of that. And after that, we're going to have an ending part of that, which is also a fixed string. So basically, the following is going to do the trick as such. Well, I'm going to save the results in a temp data set so that we can view the contents that is built by these steps. So let's do it step by step. So the first thing is, let's regard this, ignore this, and equals the last part. So we're gonna create two more columns. One is called the vars to rename. The other is called statement. So, and then we're going to say that, okay, so if it is the first observation, then let the statement be this. So this is exactly the fixed strings of this part. All right? And then we're going to remember these statements for the rest of the rows. So the result will be like this. So we're going to have a statement, and the statement is going to have a fixed string as we expect to have, like this part. All right. So So the next is that we're going to create a string and save it here in this column, which is called vars to rename. So basically it should be like taking this value and put an equal sign and concatenate with this value. So it will be like var1 equals to drag code. So this is achieved by this statement, and we're going to use the function called the cats. So the cats, the good thing about cats is that it is going to automatically truncate the leading and trailing spaces of that variable. So that variable is very long. It could be like of the length of 100. So after the values, there are a lot of white spaces. So the cats is going to remove all of these spaces. So let's just run that. And yeah, you can see that now we created this line, which is like corresponding to this plus a equal sign and then the var names, right? All right, so the next line is that we're going to attach this string into the statement. So the statement is this. We're going to attach this into the statement. And this time we're not going to use cats. Instead, we're going to use cat, because we do want to have a space between the statement and the vars to rename, right? So if we use cats, then the spaces in between will be removed, which is not good. And running that state, that part, you will see that, so for the first line, the statement will be this plus this string, right? So the second one is that, because it's already remembered the part from the first one, then it's going to add the string from the second row, this part. So the third one it would be the same thing as for the third row. So eventually, by the end of the last row, we're going to have all the variables, the variables to rename, and we're going to put it together in this statement. And this part is indeed very much like this part, and plus the fixed string. So now we have a string from this to the variables to rename. So so the next statement is about only to keep the last record. So that's how it works here. That in the set statement we're going to have an add, and we're going to assign a variable called the last, and we're going to check whether or not it is the last observation or record. So if it is the last, we are only going to keep the last one. So basically this one is only to keep it neat, to have the last to have the last record. And now instead of having all the records, we only have the last one, which contains the complete statement that we want to have, which is this part. All right. So the next one is that we're going to use the call execute trick to run the statement. But remember that that statement is not complete yet. So we'll still have to add the last part, which that we can put it in separate lines, as we did before. Remember that earlier we said that actually you don't have to put all the statements in one call execute method. All right, so the last two lines are really to run the statement, which is basically to run this part. Yeah. Okay, so the whole thing here is that we are enabled to read the mapped var names from one data set, and to modify the target data set, which is the schedule data set. All right, so we're going to run that. And we're going to see that before the schedule, the data set schedule is with the automatic names. And after this step, it is going to be renamed by the var names corresponding to this auto names. So basically, that's how it works out. Okay, so actually, this is a tutorial, and it just split it down, break it down into separate steps. So in real programming, we can make it more succinct by combine these steps together. So there is a very good example at this site, and basically it talks about the same idea. So a more compact version of that is like this one, because we don't have to don't have to save the temp file. We can have a null data set, and also we don't have to create this intermediate variables. We can do that step by step. Basically the idea behind that is the same. Yeah, we're going to run this part, and it's going to have the same result as we have using this data set, data steps. All right, so this is the example of using the data from one data set to modify the variable names in another data step. So it's going to involve the method called call execute. It involves modifying the column of variable names without reading or writing data. It involves the different functions for concatenation.